All right, so a showdown. And I got a couple of video highlights. There's a full video on social media for all of you to check out. I will be posting that original link in this clip. However, Glenn Greenwald went toe-to-toe with Alan Dershowitz. And I got to tell you, folks, the things coming out of Alan's mouth, you know, when you look at the crisis in Gaza, when you see the fact that, again, look, just putting this up here right now because we'll be saving this for Rumble. Israel claims deadly strike on Rafah was justified. Justified. And IDF says it struck legitimate targets amid reports of at least 35 civilian deaths. 35 people. That's the numbers we have so far. Those numbers are probably going to be much higher. But good old Glenn Greenwald gives a 1-2 gut check to good old Alan. Alan, what do you got to say for yourself?
That Iran did not want to kill Israelis, that it sent these hundreds of drones knowing they would all be miraculously stopped. Can you justify that?
Yeah, what I want to say is if Iran has such a primitive army that they're not capable of landing even a single missile inside Israel because all they have is a bunch of crappy drones and slow missiles that can be removed from the sky by Jordan and by the United Arab Emirates, then they're hardly an imposing country. The reality is that Hezbollah...
All you need is one to get through.
Alan, please.
Ah, yes. How can we all forget the infamous Iranian drone bombing? All of which were shot down by the United States, Great Britain, France, Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia. Whoa, what the hell happened there? But yeah, all those missiles and drone bombs were shot down. You know, this whole talk of, oh, this nation's a threat. This nation's a threat. You know, I remember not too long ago, you know, it was an innocent era, early 2001, you know, and then going on to 2003, where Saddam Hussein was viewed as the greatest threat to the free world. He had weapons of mass destruction, and we found nothing. We found absolutely nothing. We found no weapons. We found nothing that could destroy the free world. And what led, was the aftermath of the destruction of Saddam Hussein and his regime was political instability, more internal fighting, the rise of more terrorist groups, the rise of more people who wanted their own slice of the pie. That's what happened. A whole bunch of madness and insanity, thanks to, again, propaganda from corporate media saying it's a good idea for us to invade Iraq. And how'd that work out? Oh, that's right. Absolute destruction.
Hezbollah has hundreds of tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of highly sophisticated missiles pointed directly at every single major Israeli city, including Tel Aviv. If Iran wanted to do a kind of response against Israel that you're suggesting they wanted, they had that capability and they didn't because they're a rational, restrained country that didn't want to end up in a world war. I know. The only rational, restrained countries are America, Israel, and the West. That's what your media tells you all the time. So I know that you believe that. But there are actually other rational, restrained countries in the world, too. You're always told there's a new Hitler in Iran. There's a new Hitler in Russia. There's a new Hitler named Hamas. There's a new Hitler in Syria. And you believe it all the time. And you stand up and you cheer all those evil, irrational countries. As I said, if you look at who the ones are who are starting wars, it is your country, the United States, and along with Israel as well. And that is just the reality if you remove yourself from Western propaganda.
If you remove yourself from the propaganda. But no one's paying attention. No one's paying attention for the fact of why we are in these regime change wars. I want to pull up another video here about why there is, again, so much dependency by these dictators that we install by the United States. Why does the United States side with a lot of these tyrants and warlords? I'll play another video from Glenn Greenwald.
Again, we don't have any problems with dictators or with tyrannical governments. In fact, the core of American foreign policy since the end of World War II, throughout the Cold War and then into the War on Terror, is we want dictatorial regimes. It's much easier to install them because they're there to keep the population, many of whom would be anti-American because of their perception of all the wars that we start, under control. Those dictators are there in all these wonderful countries that we're told we should replicate, like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and all those Gulf states. They're there to keep the population down, and we're happy with it. We support those countries. We don't go around the world attacking other countries or trying to remove their government because we want to give those people freedom and democracy. We only do it when we see a government that doesn't do our bidding. And that was fine to do at the end of World War II when we had supremacy. Maybe it was fine when the Cold War fell and we had supremacy in the 1990s. This is now a multipolar world. If you look at why so many countries are going to China or joining BRICS, are leaving the Western influence, it's because of the resentment that this kind of mentality is spawning. What do you think the world is going to do as they watch the United States continuously assert its unilateral and singular right to start wars against other countries who are not attacking us, because we have been told over and over since birth that our country is the shining beacon on the hill, that we are the emblem of democracy, that it's only other countries, those bad countries like Iran and Russia and China, where bad things happen. We're the good countries. Our wars are good. I think if there's anything that the last 20 years of history should tell us, is that we have to start thinking critically about all of this propaganda, thinking critically about what the role of our own country is in the world, and all of the devastation and misery and suffering and bloodshed and instability that happens whenever our government or our media convinces us to support yet another war. This would be the worst of all of those wars because of how big Iran is, because of how sophisticated their military is. And if you thought Iraq was bad, think about what bombing Iran will entail.
And you know what? He's absolutely correct. I didn't want to interrupt him. I didn't want to pause. I wanted to play that video in its full entirety. Here are my thoughts on this. We want to have, if the United States gets its way, because remember, folks, Iran was always on the list, just like Syria, just like Iraq, Libya, all these regions. Never forget, never forget, never forget when we had all these people warn us, from military personnel to journalists to people who were whistleblowers, who said, hey, the United States wants to be in all these regions, all these wars. If there's to be a conflict with Iran and the United States, or Israel, with Israel there, it will be far more devastating than what we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I could think about the billions upon billions upon billions of dollars of treasury that would be wasted. We have people foaming at the mouth, ready for another war. Don't we have enough already? We have political instability in Syria and Libya. We have this ongoing ridiculous conflict in Ukraine. We have this conflict that is happening in Gaza. We have a potential conflict happening between Taiwan and China. It's never enough. It's never enough for these greedy bastards who want to forever have the military-industrial complex running the show. And if you're not concerned by the amount of wars that have been adding up, because let's look back when the war on terror started, way back in 2001. Here we are now in 2024, 23 years later, and we are stuck. There's no peace. There's no final victory. There's no end of the war. There's none of that happening. It's on to the next conflict, and on to the next conflict, and on to the next conflict, because all these conflicts serve as great distractions so that the masses aren't aware of the corruption and the abuse that our politicians are putting upon us. I want to play one more final video here. Now, this is from Turncoat Don, good friend of the show. Brace yourself, folks, because I had to do a double take on this one. Iraq and Iran are going to be mentioned again, but bear with me. Try not to punch your screen. Try not to yell at it, because what good old Alan says, I'm surprised Glenn didn't spit the water out.
In a world where we judge things not by good, better, best, but by worse, worser, worsest, and unbelievably bad, the question is, what's worse? A country like Saddam Hussein's, where he oppresses its own people, and which is terrible. And we shouldn't have gone to war with Saddam Hussein. We went against the wrong country. It should have been.
I'm sorry.
Iran.
What? I'm sorry. What? What? Say it again, genius.
With Saddam Hussein, we went against the wrong country. It should have been Iran. Hussein, we went against the wrong country. It should have been Iran.
Really? Really? Iran?
What the hell did you just say?
And we shouldn't have gone to war with Saddam Hussein. We went against the wrong country. It should have been Iran, or a country which exports.
See, and there's Glenn. Glenn, such a perfect face right there. What what are you talking about, Home Slice? So we wouldn't get okay. Well, here, let's play this scenario out, folks. Let's say in the year 2003, United States went to war with Iran instead of Iraq, right? Let's say that happened. Do you want to know what would be happening many few years down the road? This jagoff would have been saying, we went to war with the wrong country. We should have invaded Iraq instead of Iran. Iraq, Iran, Iraq. What's it going to be? So we went to war with the wrong country. So that means so many people died for no fucking reason. These pundits who talk about war are not serious people. And if you think these jagoffs are going to be on the front line or send their kids on the front line, you're kidding yourself. And if you also think that people like this are going to be at the front line reporting what's happening there with the soldiers and Marines facing the fire, no. Allen's chicken shit. He's not a chicken hawk. He's chicken shit. And that's being disrespectful to shite as well because, you know what? At least it's used as fertilizer. This man is absolutely useless.
Which exports terrorism around the world. And if you're going to be a policeman, you don't police people for what they do to their own citizens. There are courts for that. There are international courts. But you do make sure.
International courts? What good are the international courts? I mean, already the ICC has been saying, like, hey, look, we're going to issue out these arrest warrants for Israel. But the United States is saying, don't you do that or we're going to put sanctions on you. So what good are the international criminal courts? The United States isn't going to abide by it.
Sure that countries can't hurt you and can't hurt your allies. And the difference between Iran and Iraq or between Iran and Saudi Arabia is Iran is the greatest exporter of terrorism in the history of the world.
And where did some of the 9/11 pilots come from? You guys might not have heard of this place. You never heard of it? Little known place called first Saudia, last name Arabia. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to be more precise. You know. And who was that mastermind? Where did he come from? He didn't come from Iran. He didn't come from Iraq. He didn't come from Kuwait. He didn't come from Afghanistan. Oh, that's right. That little known place called Saudi Arabia. Geniuses like this, people like Allen, drag us into these wars. People like Allen like to tell us and talk down to us that, oh, we must do this. We must launch this preemptive strike, this preemptive strike. All what we're doing is creating more and more enemies. New enemies that want nothing more than our destruction as well. This is how man's inhumanity to man continues the cycle of abuse and tyranny. We're better than this. We should be better than this. We should be smarter than this. And yet we fail all the time because our media and our politicians have brainwashed us. Now, I don't know how Glenn Greenwald sat through that whole thing. He's made out of stronger stuff than I am. But he's speaking truth to power, especially when it comes down to why we have tyrants and dictators, why certain countries are not following through with the plan to, I don't know, ignite, I guess, the military-industrial complex, foaming at the mouth for forever war, for starting World War III. If we're going to be a better people, the first step is for us to take accountability for the politicians that are in office, because they don't represent us. Politicians are not representatives. Politicians only care about their self-interest. None of these people who sit in the U.S. Senate and House care about the American people. They care about their profits. They care about how much money they're going to make. They're going to care about what they can get in the long run for themselves or in the short run too. All what they care about is money, money, money. And the same people who own our politicians control the media. And the same media is telling us, oh, we got to be afraid of Iran. We got to be afraid of Russia. We got to be afraid of all these places. Now, there's no such thing as a perfect government. No such thing exists. But we are not helping the next generation by enticing all these other nations to be ready for war as well. Because all it takes is for one dumb decision. And that's it for humanity. We're done. We won't survive a global conflict. Here's hoping that one day clear heads do prevail, but knowing the amount of influence of money in politics, it's going to require the people to start stepping up. And that's how we get there. by saying no more.